We're about to deal with nails, nails which were, until the 19th century, entirely handmade. In fact, most early timber buildings were jointed with timber, tree nails as they're called, which are just pointed pieces of timber, and pegs, dowels or cylindrical pegs. These nails were a gift from Chris Howe, the nail expert, and they would have been used in Denmark well into the 19th century. In Australia these were used. We have no examples from Australia, so these three are all Danish examples. Nails were very expensive, metal nails were very expensive, had to be made by a blacksmith, so if a building was demolished, often they were salvaged and recycled. Now, a handmade nail made by a blacksmith might look like this one here, which is beaten with a hammer, and the process of beating it gives it a fibrous quality and a resilience, so it becomes a strong nail that can be bent. The simplest way of dealing with the head is this one, but this is not a building nail. This is a horseshoe nail, this gradually tapering nail. For a building nail, you have to form some sort of head, and this is the simplest of them. It's formed only in two dimensions. So the nail is uniform thickness back to front, but it has this little clinched over head at the top. The next phase is a rose head, which is three-dimensional. All these are still being formed by a blacksmith, and therefore are quite expensive and quite specialised items. Then you had items like this, which is a clout. This is a very wide head, a short shaft. This is for fixing fabric to walls like hessian for wallpaper, or even light metal sheeting like zinc sheeting would be fixed onto the frame with a clout. And then these nails are all used in different ways. This would be in the 18th century, where you have ordinary nails for the framing, some which are very long to go through the purlin here. This has a chisel head, and the point of that chisel head is that that shape is thought to split the timber less than a sharp point. And then there are nails for fixing into the masonry. This spike here, which would hold something onto the brick wall. Now, the early developments of these nails tended towards cutting them with machinery in this sort of shape. This is a cut brad, and why this is simple to cut is that it's a uniform thickness back to front. It's just a profile, and it's done by chopping off from a sheet alternate brad. So they go, I can't hold the white up with this, they go head to toe like this, and there's no wastage. So you have a flywheel with two choppers that go chop, 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 and brad putting alternate directions fall off it. So it's a very efficient way of making them. But these have not been beaten by a blacksmith, so they're not nearly as resilient as a Smith forged nail. They're cheaper, and they're used for undemanding situations like fixing floorboards especially. The next stage is the invention of the Eubank patent nail, as it's called. These are rather like handmade nails to look at, and often they are mistaken for them, but they've been produced in a machine which presses the shaft with cam pressure, so it has some of the effect of a blacksmith beating it with a hammer. It gives it a fibrous quality and makes these stronger nails that are produced relatively cheaply by a machine. Now they have, over time, they have some changes, but first they have the same chisel point designed for fixing to timber. Over time the form of the heads differs. By the 1860s they have a little star on the head which helps you to recognise them. These are known as Eubank from one of the partners in the company, although he was not the inventor, he was a merchant. But they're especially used in Australia more than any other part of the world, because they could deal with the hardwoods in Australia, which were not so much of a problem in places like Britain. After the Eubank nail, which comes in perhaps about the 1830s but isn't common in Australia until the 1850s, you get the wire nail. Now the wire nail is made, as the name implies, by chopping off wire. Now wire is already rolled, it's already flexible and strong, so it has that quality of being able to be bent, which nails ideally would have. And And a nail like this you'll find has on it grip marks. It's held, the wire is held in a vise at the top, and little marks are left there. And while it's held there, the head is pressed down onto it, and the point is made at the same time. So it's really just a piece of wire with a point at one end and a head formed at the other. Over time, the heads evolve, and the earliest or the earlier forms tend to be more like this bullet head, not the flat head of the later nail. And one interesting development, quite unusual, is this one here. These are nails which have a slight twist in the shaft. They're screw nails. They're invented by a schoolmaster in Britain called Martin Wigsell, and rather surprisingly we found examples of them in Australia. The idea of the twist is that they hold better and they can be got out by twisting, and maybe a little bit easier to reuse. This is another unusual nail, or quasar nail. It's designed for fixing trellis work and so on, training vines on a wall. And we're lucky here because we found these in Australia, but we found the British patent for them, so we can identify them clearly with this patent of 1891. Another slightly different object is this. Now this is a spike designed for driving into a masonry wall. It might be driven in, say, to support a gutter, made just the same way by a blacksmith, but of much heavier gauge. The largest type of nails generally are referred to as spikes. They go on being handmade even into the early 20th century, whereas smaller handmade nails are superseded entirely by U-bank nails and wire nails. When you come to the exposed areas and the roof especially, often nails can be galvanised like these ones. Now this nail here has a chisel point, so it's meant to go into perhaps a roofing batten, but the whole surface is galvanised with zinc, so it's designed for protection from the weather. And here's another one with a domed head, but again it's a galvanised roofing nail, but in this case with a point, so not necessarily for a timber batten, for general purpose use. Then you get specially formed nails for fixing particularly corrugated iron, which have these flat heads. Now I'll start with one which is unusual. This one here has on it the remains of a timber plug. This must have been not in a conventional roof, must have been driven into a wall for some reason. So the timber plug was put into the wall first, the nail was then driven into the timber. And it bears on the top of it, it's the name of its manufacturer. It's Coop's patent, and Coop was a Melbourne lead worker and nail manufacturer. This is a more general example. So you tend to have an iron nail with a normal head, then onto that is cast soft lead, and the lead then can take up the shape and is driven into the roof shape of the iron and seal properly rather than have gaps into which the water will come. And you can see more clearly how that's done, where you have here the nail itself with a rather wide sort of flange around it, and then on top of it is the lead head which would be cast onto the top. And then the next stage in the roofing development is this, which is a roofing screw with a washer attached to it for the same sorts of reason. There are a number of other types. Some of them are shaped with curved washers to fit the curve of corrugated iron, and especially from about the 1890s, they're common in Australia and New Zealand.